everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and the questers that are Josh and Dan. I am Dan, with me is Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things quizzical and, again, confidential, because we have two emails to get to. Actually, only one email to get to, one email to talk about, because today, thank you, Chad, I got my stickers. I believe Josh will get his probably tomorrow or the next day for slighting me on the podcast. I did get two. I love them. They're nice and shiny, and one's going to be stuck right on the outside of my dice bag. So we're good to go there. So thank you, Chad. Good to your word. Appreciate that. Otherwise, our second email is actually an email from Nanander, because he has a question for Josh, and I cannot help with this answer in any way, shape, manner, or form. Hey, Josh. Hey, Dan. Just a quick question, or rather request about the gauntlet. Could you elaborate and philosophize a little bit on how the gauntlet became named the gauntlet? The two avenues I can come up with are steel glove or series of trials to pass. Both of them kind of make sense, but neither really seems to hit home for me. Is there more to know about how you ended up with the name? In my German group, I now have a player picking up the gauntlet as second discipline. Therefore, we need to invent a German name for it. I briefly discussed it with some folk on the Discord already, but also that did not end up very conclusively. Thanks, Nanender. Josh, take it away.
Well, I can't provide a lot of insight into why the gauntlet came to be called the gauntlet, because I wasn't heavily involved in the early design stages of that. I was involved a little bit going over the in-character essay that was provided by the freelancer who wrote that, and so helped with a little bit of feedback and polish there. But I always considered the gauntlet to be named after the metal glove. The idea of it being the challenge doesn't sit quite well with me. And I think, at least for me, the reason why that works is because the gauntlet is a punchy guy. It's a fist. It is the idea that they are a tough, physical, armored, battering force, which is what a gauntlet, the metal glove would be.
Yeah.
Certainly the idea that a series of challenges that needs to be overcome, the idea of running the gauntlet where you have someone who is sort of undergoing a difficult trial. To draw a pop culture reference here for the example, the old 90s era TV show Xena, Warrior Princess, which was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, watched it pretty regularly all the way through, and it was in fact the source of my first paid writing gig, as I actually wrote reviews of the episodes and stuff for a now defunct website for a while. But one of the early episodes that she was introduced in, which was actually on the Hercules show, was called The Gauntlet, where she was leaving the war band that she was in charge of, and in order to do that, had to undergo a trial where basically all of the members of her troop lined up two lines opposite each other, and she had to walk between them, with them basically free to, without weapons, but free to beat the snot out of her. And the idea sort of from that being nobody would leave the group, because ultimately the amount of abuse that you would suffer in the course of that would leave you broken, crippled, down, whatever.
Yeah.
But of course, the Warrior Princess got through and went on to like an amazing life beyond that.
Career. Yes.
So I can see as well the idea of that. I did not beforehand do a dive into the etymology of gauntlet and sort of which use of the word came first and whether one derives from the other or what the situation is. But for me, the idea that it is the metal glove that one would wear on the hand represents sort of symbolically what the gauntlet discipline is to a certain extent.
Fair. I just pulled up some
Yeah, so in terms of translating it to a German name, you would probably want to find something that is along those lines.
Yeah. I did a little bit of etymology from history.com. Today, the phrase throw down the gauntlet means to challenge or confront someone, but in its earliest use, it wasn't meant as a metaphor, but was a physical action intended to issue a formal challenge to a duel. The word itself comes from the French word gantelet and referred to the heavy armored gloves worn by medieval knights. In an age when chivalry and personal honor were paramount, throwing a gauntlet at the feet of an enemy or opponent was considered a grave insult that could only be answered with personal combat, and the offended party was expected to take up the gauntlet to acknowledge and accept the challenge. Over time, as heavy steel armor became less common, gauntlets referred to any heavy glove with an extended cuff to protect the wrists, and the practice of using gloves to initiate duels continued until dueling was outlawed in Europe and the US in the late 18th century. A similar sounding phrase, to run the gauntlet, Josh pretty much already explained, has completely different origin deriving from the Swedish word getlop and Old English gantlop, meaning lane course or passageway. So that was a military punishment where the prisoner was forced to run or walk between two columns of troops, as Josh pointed out earlier in Xena. So, yeah, I think to take up the gauntlet is actually...
So yes. They are not actually etymological... They do not share any kind of common etymology.
Yes.
Etymologically. They are not...
Yeah, there we go.
They share the word, but there is no common origin between them. They come from different languages that just have similar sounding words. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I literally just looked that up because Josh was kind of, we don't exactly know where the gauntlet came from at Earthdawn. Kind of like people didn't know where running the gauntlet came from or pick up the gauntlet or throw down the gauntlet. So there you are. I like the idea of the Earthdawn take up the gauntlet because I've been challenged to physical combat. And that's, for me, what that means.
Even with that sort of understanding, I still think that the idea of the gauntlet in the sense of a heavy metal glove or similar thing is the appropriate metaphor to carry for the discipline.
Yeah, because in the Cathay book, they had the pugilist, which is a whole different thing later on. We're going to hand wave that one gone.
We don't talk about Cathay.
We don't talk about Cathay, kind of like we don't talk about 2016. Anyway.
We don't talk about Bruno.
We don't talk about Fight Club. We have an announcement. We are going to be doing a live podcast on February the 20th, 2022 for FredoniaCon. This is our second live podcast. So we are going to crowdsource material from all of the listeners and all of your friends, cousins, and cousins' roommates, third removed down the line. We need emails to answer live on the air, on video, for Josh and or me, mostly Josh, because I have to prep for the show and Josh does not. Anyway, so feel free to email us all your questions. We will amass them. We will hold on to them until the 20th. And that gives you about 11 days when this podcast goes live to give us all the questions you have. And so we can just hold on to them all, collect them, and do them one at a time for Josh. Because otherwise, it's going to be to fill content. We're going to have to ask Josh a questionnaire of random stupid questions. So what are your favorite
pizza toppings? But
or show us your dice online, whatever. Hold your dice up to the camera.
If you were not aware, FredoniaCon is the online convention. This will be the second year that it is happening. It is the weekend of February 18th to 20th. So as of the release of this episode, it's about a week and a half away.
Mm-hmm.
There will be various panels and events and stuff that are going on over the course of the weekend. It'll start Friday evening Eastern time and carry through Saturday and into Sunday, wrapping up sort of late Sunday afternoon. The live Earthdawn Survival Guide will be sort of the last event before the closing ceremonies. There will be games that will be run online. I am running one Saturday morning. If you want more information, go ahead and visit fasagames.com or head to the FASA Discord. We've got information and links and so forth that will have more details on how to get involved with that. But please, feel free to send questions to us to talk about on the live show Sunday. That is going to be at 4 p.m. Central, 4 p.m.
Eastern.
4 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
look forward to hearing from you all.
That's what's coming up. So get us your questions, even if they are not questions that you think we would normally address. The live show tends to be a little bit more freewheeling. And if we don't get enough emails, then we might get questions and other stuff from the folks that are present in the chat on the Discord at the time. If you listened back and you heard the live show from last year, that's the sort of thing that you're likely to end up with.
All questions welcome. Some may not be answered. No holds barred. Send them to us. Meantime, we can get to our regular episode. On to the Crownbreakers, our secret society of Barsaive, out of the first edition book here published way back in the late 90s. The Crownbreakers is an interesting group of people. Some adepts, some not adepts, but mostly, we're not going to bury the lead anymore. They're a cult of the mad passion Raggok.
Yes.
And if you want to hear about Raggok and the questors of Raggok, go back to episode 62 from March of 2021 and listen to that. So pause the show now, go listen, come back. It'll make a whole lot more sense. Just teasing. The essay was kind of fun to read because it took place over the course of about 11 weeks with only 13 entries. So roughly one a week, but really more at the beginning and fewer entries at the end, because I think that it's hinted at that the person who was infiltrating the secret society, the Crownbreakers, turned and was initiated into the cult, and they lost contact with them after that. So that was an interesting little, okay, that happened. So what's your initial take on the Crownbreakers?
The Crownbreakers are an interesting group. They are a sort of smallish organization, relatively speaking, and devoted to anarchy and deposing and defeating any kind of
authority
of any kind that they may encounter. Basically with the idea of sowing strife and chaos and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
You know, there's nothing beyond that. Kind of the antithesis, in a sense, of Raggok's former position as the passion of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when he was Rashomon before going mad. And basically turning that on its head and saying no leaders or kings of any kind. The Crownbreakers essentially infiltrate places and turn people against the leaders in their communities.
Yeah, be they benevolent or not, they don't care. Just
the idea being long-term that they are going to destabilize areas, ostensibly to be sort of working against the Kingdom of Throal as the largest representation of leadership in the province. That the Crownbreakers, at least as presented here in this book, mainly operate in the Throal Mountains, dealing with smaller and more remote communities. But the idea being that they are causing strife and problems to draw Throlic soldiers to these distant areas, thereby weakening the potential military force that could come into play at the kingdom itself and cause problems for what was at the time King Nedin, and to potentially destabilize Throal and cause problems for it, with the long-term goal of possibly overthrowing the crown and causing problems for the kingdom.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about the possible 4th edition update to the timeline and how the Crownbreakers are doing now that Nedin's no longer there. They're probably enjoying the hell out of that.
Well, there's still a monarchy. There's still a king on the throne of Throal, while Throl's position within the province is less imperialistic, culturally imperialistic.
Fair.
You know, where they've been pulling themselves back and not being as involved in the affairs of other powers so much, being more internally focused. They are still a monarchy. There is still a king, and that is something that the Crownbreakers would be interested in continuing to destabilize.
Yeah.
We have not had anything used thus far in terms of the Crownbreakers when it comes to appearances in other products.
Yeah.
Mainly because of their focus on Throal, and we haven't focused a whole lot on Throal or done a lot of development on the current status of Throal. We have not been particularly, had the opportunity to use them.
Well, because they're not even throughout all of Throal. They're just in the upper northeast region primarily.
Right. Well, as we find out in the course of the entry, that we learn in the course of this essay that while the primary operations of the Crownbreakers are out of the sort of northern and eastern edges of the Throal Mountains, they actually are based out of Bartertown. The founder and leader of the organization
One more try.
is based out of Bartertown, and it is from there that he manages the operations of the group.
Yeah, and that is the dwarf Endaren Oakhaft, and he is not an adept, but he is a 12th circle questor of Raggok.
Yes.
And so he's no slouch in that department, and he doesn't really fear any of his adepts underneath him as also questors because he outranks him severely. But there's a difference in the questor powers in the Secret Societies of Barsaive book and the questor powers in the 4th edition. So some of those may not translate over. However, that's not the main gist of the
idea
tonight.
Being, if you are sort of adapting him to 4th edition rules, as a rank 12 questor, he is the top of the heap. That is the highest rank that a questor can achieve. And there's quite a bit, actually, of backstory that is provided on Oakhaft in the course of things. He is...
Oakhaft. I said Oakhaft.
Oakhaft.
Talking about
that he is descended from a questor who went mad and killed a bunch of people in a care during the Scourge and was raised to serve Raggok and devoted himself to the cause with incredible fervor, which is why he is as high-ranking and powerful as he is.
Oh, yeah. This disruption is his religion from, born and bred.
This is like generational evil cult stuff. It's really nice that we get this very clearly bad guy organization that is devoted to tearing down the structures of society, in a sense. That is the hierarchies and the leadership of people over each other. And the sort of story of the character that we follow through the essay, who is a Theron agent that was recruited to be a Theron agent because of anger towards the Kingdom of Throal, that anger and bitterness is capitalized upon by Raggok and the questors of Raggok to convert her to the cause. And this is not the only essay in this book we will find where the agent that is trying to infiltrate this group ends up getting co-opted by the group in the course of it. But this is the sort of first one of them that we've come across.
Yeah, totally. I did find it interesting that after 8 weeks for the essay, the entries are done on a single day. They're very good at being the infiltrator and the spy. They're leaving things for the group of the Crownbreakers to actually find, correspondence that hasn't been sent out, and they're keeping their own correspondence on their person so it can't be found out. But after 8 weeks, the infiltrator is considering questing for Raggok, and after 11 weeks, they're hearing Raggok whispering in their ear. And so you're in deep at that point. And so it's very convincing by then to just have Raggok feed you more of that anger you're driven by in the first place.
And that's something that could be familiar to folks as well if you remember the Raggok chapter in the Questors book kind of follows a similar idea, with the narrator of that being someone who gradually becomes disillusioned and bitter and is shaped to follow Raggok. The aspects of Raggok that character follows are less anarchy, tearing down structures and people of power, and more of the vengeance and jealousy and bitterness aspect of things. But it is a very similar path. The idea being that once you let a being like this into your heart and mind, it becomes very, very difficult to dislodge it, and it acts as its own kind of corrupting influence over the individual that is embracing those sorts of things. And I like the idea how that is presented as a dangerous thing. The idea that, oh yeah, you're going to try and infiltrate this group to find out what's going on and so forth. And that is just a big, it's potentially a big problem. I mean, the agent was not aware of the Crownbreakers at first. They were just dispatched to look into this unrest that was going on in the area, and found the Crownbreakers agent that was kind of fomenting the malaise and rebellions that were happening in the area. In the course of infiltrating them, but being honest as well, found out that it was a group that was actually very well suited to their long-term objectives of lashing out at Throal in retaliation for the loss of their own children as a result of Throlic policy in the wake of Varilus's death and the battle at Prajor's Field and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. They sent the right agent. However, you lost that agent because you sent the right person. But to back up a little bit or so, I find it interesting that the Crownbreakers are there to discredit and shame. That is not really the right word, but to just feed the dissension within the ranks of any leader in any community whatsoever, and to foment that rebellion so that the community will just tear itself apart. And I find it ironic that they want to absolutely erase any authority in any form, but they're still ahead of the Crownbreakers, being, Endaren Oakhaft, and he's got underlings below him. So he's got his own little hierarchy. He's the authority. He's directing everything else. So I don't know if they see the irony or they don't care yet.
I don't have any real way of addressing that. I mean, hypocrisy is not something that is unknown when it comes to cults and bad guys and secret societies and things like that.
No,
I don't know.
Wanted to point that out there.
Long term, whether the idea is once we destroy Throal or once we take down whatever authority figures there are, then our task is done and we will go our separate ways kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, they also do have their eyes on House Certus, but they understand that they don't have the personnel, the amount of personnel.
Yeah, they don't really have any.
A, and B, at the moment, don't have any Tiskrang agents either in this cult.
I mean, that is something that could potentially change. It also, in addition to Oakhaft, it does mention some other individuals as well that could be developed as antagonists, especially if you are looking at using the Crownbreakers as a long-term antagonist group in some capacity. They do have a few adepts.
Yeah, the essay's got at least half a dozen in there.
Adepts that are also questors, and it mentions a wizard, an archer, a swordmaster. It sort of makes them the more dangerous members of the group, and you can scale the difficulty of them based on what your group might be involved with. And of course, it has been a few years since this report was generated. There is always the possibility of things to have changed or for the group to be a little bit more involved. An interesting idea, because another thing that sort of comes up and gets referenced in this is another cult of Raggok.
Well, hold on. Let's say, hold that thought real quick, because I do want to mention there's at least, throughout the essay, there's 12 other chapters spread throughout the Throal Mountains. But to your point, that was as this essay was written a few years ago. So perhaps this cult is a little bit more robust than it was. And more than 12, more than a dozen, maybe 24 by this point, or, whatever, throughout and more deeper into Bartertown, maybe.
It's certainly a possibility.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, especially with Throal pulling itself back and not being as much of a presence in Barsaive, even with more isolated villages, that would give plenty of opportunity for this organization to operate and perhaps turn people against Throal, while it's also turning them against their more local leadership.
Yes. So let's get back onto what you were going to start with now. There seems to be an overlap with another cult of Raggok in Bartertown. Yeah. This is where I was surprised at the end of this essay that I'm like, well, I hadn't heard of this, or this needs to refresh my memory. It referred us to the Throal source book, also first edition, and that's where we came across the Hive of Ashes.
Yes, the Hive of Ashes.
What do you want to tell us about that?
So the Hive of Ashes is connected with an individual in Bartertown known as Crarites, who is actually an avatar of Raggok. He's not just a questor. He is an actual avatar of the Passion.
The embodiment of when it decides to show up. A
big troll, but he has founded a group known as the Hive of Ashes, which operates out of Throal, and gave his dark gifts to an individual who has become corrupted and is essentially at this point, as it says, a minor horror or perhaps a powerful horror construct. And that dark gift has been shared, and the network of the Hive of Ashes has been expanded to many individuals throughout Throal. Oakhaft has become aware of that organization's existence, though he is not aware of his Passion's avatar operating. And so an interesting situation could develop where those two groups work together towards the shared goal of toppling Throal as a political power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the inside out. And letting the citizens of Throal at that point basically be their own rebellion, depose the king, blood and terror in the streets, all that fun stuff, and just, sow seeds of doubt, discord, and chaos and anarchy. Dogs and cats living together.
As Alfred said in The Dark Knight, some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yes.
And that is the ultimate goal of the Crownbreakers, is to kind of see the world burn by turning people against their leaders and then turning the people against whoever replaces those leaders, fomenting anarchy and terror and rebellion and pain. Because even if a rebellion doesn't succeed, there's still a lot of pain and suffering that comes about as a result of it, which makes Raggok happy.
Yes. If this is not enough for you to actually be interested in adding the Crownbreakers to your campaign in any way, shape, manner, or form, if you want to be a little bit more blunt and overt about it, there are two adventure ideas at the back of the essay in the Secret Societies of Barsaive book. One actually does involve the avatar of Raggok, Crarites. So if that's not enough, I don't know what would interest you to do this, but if you want to lay long planned seeds of doubt and have this epic length campaign, there's, like we said, half a dozen NPCs in the essay. You got two adventure ideas as well to just kind of whet people's appetite. But I think there's a whole lot that can be done with this right here.
You could even adapt this idea without too much difficulty to have them operating in another area. The idea of a Raggok cult that is dedicated to toppling leaders is one that can very easily drop into any area where there are leaders. I mean, you have a game based out of Travar.
Yeah.
Whether just reskinning them so that they're in a different area or just using the Crownbreakers as an inspiration for another cult or group of Raggok cultists that are interested in tearing down the magistrates of Travar and the way that things operate there. Any kind of situation that has a group like this chipping away at the foundations of stable society, individual issues that we might have with different forms of government aside, generally speaking, stability is a good thing, and this is a group that is interested in doing everything that they can to collapse it.
Yeah, pretty much. So, as I said, they're here to sow seeds of anarchy and chaos. So that, I can't say is in and itself fun, but it's a game. So you can have fun with that. But yeah, I think this is, for one of the shorter entries in the book, The Secret Societies of Barsaive, this is material that is rich and rife for sowing seeds from to use in anybody's campaign for a long time.
And it's not even, honestly, that short an entry. I mean, it's 5 pages is the report from the Theron agent, and then we've got another 4 pages of the game information, which for first edition, has additional questor powers, which have parallels or similar things to powers that show up in the questor's book. Obviously, if you're playing a 4th edition game, you'll probably better served using the rules there, because the questors of Mad Passions are designed around the idea of being appropriate opposition for adepts.
Yeah. So it's fantastic stuff. We will delve into other secret societies and other podcasts, but any final thoughts on this group and or the Hive of Ashes? Because I think the Cult of Raggok, the Crownbreakers is bad enough, but I think the Hive of Ashes is a whole different, darker turn.
Yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I don't have any more comments now, except to reiterate what I kind of kept coming across when we were going through the dragons stuff, which was, oh yeah, I had forgotten about this. This is cool. And there's still the opportunity to, how might, is there a possibility for us to bring them in some capacity, knowing where they were operating before and stuff like that?
Yeah. No, fair. We're just here to spark Josh's creativity to, get more product out there eventually. So we're reminding him all the stuff that's sitting out there collecting dust in other forms. But yeah, I think that's not a bad little thought. We'll just get Josh's wheels turning in that sewer grade of a mind he's got there.
All right. So that'll wrap it up for us this week.
Absolutely will.
Remember February 20th? The live survival guide as the sort of one of the closing events of FreedoniaCon. Get us your questions. Yes. Even if you don't attend the live recording, we will be releasing the audio on that in the feed as normal. So that'll be an episode that everybody gets. Send in your stuff. Check out FreedoniaCon. Play in a game. Attend panels. We'll be recording and posting the stuff from that as well, like we did last year. So if you miss anything, you will have the opportunity to get caught up.
Absolutely. So until next time, folks, it is time for you to go start the cult of For Your Own Legend.
Good night, everybody.